The most important date in the history of the Electoral College is September 4th, 1787. On that day, the Third Committee of 11 reported their solutions to various unresolved constitutional issues. Little is known about the discussions that took place, as Madison's notes only detail the members from each state. After the convention, some private letters provide suggestions about who should be given credit for the Electoral College design. Pierce Butler of South Carolina would take personal credit for creating the Electoral College. In a letter he claims, "The mode of which I had the honor of proposing in the committee in my weak judgment precludes corruption and tumult." In another letter, John Dickinson of Delaware claimed credit should be given to James Madison for sketching out the concept in committee. Regardless of who should be given credit, the end result of the committee's work combined the elector's method with the legislature method. With the convention's second great compromise, the Electoral College was born. When the members of the Third Committee of 11 returned from deliberating, they presented a new idea to appoint the president. Through negotiation, they found a potential solution by blending the electors and legislature methods so that the electors would nominate candidates and the legislature would select one of them to be president. Understanding this premise, the primary question to be answered in this video is, what evidence is there to support the electors nominate, House selects concept? Secondary questions include, why is the creation of the Electoral College considered the second great compromise? What is double balloting? And finally, what is the definition of decentralization and deliberation, and how does it relate to the framers' method? Leading up to the Third Committee of 11, the delegates at the Constitutional Convention were unable to coalesce around a single method to choose the president. On August 6th, John Rutledge of South Carolina delivered copies of a draft constitution from the Committee of Detail. From August 6th to August 24th, the convention debated the draft Articles 1 through 9. On August 24th, the convention turned its attention to Article 10 and the election of the president. Article 10, Section 1, regarding the appointment of the president, reads as follows. The executive power of the United States shall be vested in a single person. His style shall be the President of the United States of America, and his title shall be His Excellency. He shall be elected by ballot by the legislature. He shall hold his office during the term of 7 years, but shall not be elected a second time. Debate centered around the legislature and whether to use a joint ballot or vote in separate chambers. There were 15 debate mentions and 2 votes. During the debate, Jonathan Dayton of New Jersey moved to insert the phrase, each state having 1 vote for a joint ballot in the legislature. This was the first mention of the single vote per state delegation concept in relation to choosing the president. The popular vote was debated twice and held a single vote. 2 states were in favor and 9 states against. The convention debated the electors' method and held 2 votes. The first vote was motioned for by Governor Morris of Pennsylvania as he made his stance against the appointment by the legislature, claiming legislative tyranny, as it would create cabal and corruption. Morris proposed, the president, quote, shall be chosen by electors to be chosen by the people of the several states. The first vote for the electors' method failed with 5 votes for and 6 votes against. A second vote was held for the electors' method without specifying who would choose the electors. This would also fail with 4 votes for, 4 votes against, 2 votes divided, and 1 state absent. The following week, with a presidential appointment method not fully agreed to, the convention voted to postpone the debate. The convention then formed the Third Committee of 11 to find a solution. After the Third Committee of 11 convened, they reported their findings on September 4th. The 4 clauses regarding the appointment of the president are as follows. Each state shall appoint in such manner as its legislature may direct, a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators, and members of the House of Representatives, to which the state may be entitled in the legislature. The electors shall meet in their respective states, and vote by ballot for 2 persons, of whom one at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves, and they shall make a list of all the persons voted for, and of the number of votes for each, which list they shall sign and certify and transmit, sealed to the seat of the general government, directed to the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate shall, in that house, open all the certificates, and the vote shall be then and there counted. The person having the greatest number of votes shall be the president, if such number be a majority of that of the electors. If there be more than one who have such majority, and have an equal number of votes, Then the Senate shall immediately choose by ballot one of them for president. But if no person have a majority, then from the 5 highest on the list, the Senate shall choose by ballot the president. The process to create the Electoral College was very similar to the Great Compromise and the creation of our bicameral legislature. There was extensive debate over different methods. When the convention was at an impasse, they sent one member from each state delegation into an ad hoc committee. The committee found a way to blend together already proposed methods, presented their solution to the convention, which then went on to approve the compromise. Just as the first Great Compromise found a solution for the legislative branch, the second Great Compromise found a solution for the executive branch. Here's a breakdown of what the committee reported. After the debates on September 4th, 5th, and 6th, the selection of the president would be changed to the House of Representatives, voting by state delegation. Ultimately, what the framers created was a process where the electors nominated 5 candidates and the House would select one of these 5 nominees. The evidence to support the concept that the electors nominate and the House selects is supported by 2 types of debate mentions in response to the committee's proposal. First, the delegates made literal suggestions that electors would nominate candidates for the Senate to choose from. This would eventually change to the House. Secondly, the delegates held a strong aversion to the Senate's selection of the president. This suggests they predicted the upper chamber's frequent role in the final appointment. This aversion to the Senate was so strong they removed it from selection duties. The following quotes are from the 4th through the 6th of September. The source material for all of these quotes may be found in Max Farrand's The Records of the Federal Convention of 1787. Not all quotes are included. The full list of quotes regarding the electors nominate, House selects concept may be found in the book On the Framers' Method, How the Electoral College and the Hamilton Method Can Defeat Populism and Tyranny. James Madison of Virginia claimed the attention of the electors would be turned too much to making candidates instead of giving their votes in order to a definitive choice, in which the election would in fact be consigned to the Senate altogether. Roger Sherman of Connecticut pointed out that while small states held an advantage in the Senate to select one of 5 candidates, the large states would have in fact the nomination of these candidates. George Mason of Virginia had the most specific predictions, saying, 19 times in 20 the president would be chosen by the Senate. The following day, Mason would continue. It puts the appointment, in fact, into the hands of the Senate, as it will rarely happen that a majority of the whole votes will fall on any one candidate, and as the existing president will always be one of the 5 highest, his reappointment will of course depend on the Senate. Charles Pinckney of South Carolina made several charges against the committee's method, with his leading argument being that it threw the whole appointment in fact into the hands of the Senate. Pinckney pointed out possible sporadic voting patterns as electors will be swayed by an attachment to the eminent men of their respective states. Hence, secondly, the dispersion of the votes would leave the appointment with the Senate, and as the president's reappointment will thus depend on the Senate, he will be the mere creature of that body. From the beginning, James Wilson of Pennsylvania sought to remove the Senate altogether. He suggested the legislature make the eventual appointment as the House of Representatives will be so often changed as to be free from the influence and faction to which the permanence of the Senate may subject that branch. Next, he pointed out the indirect consequences of a Senate appointment as they will have in fact the appointment of the President, and through his dependence on them, the virtual appointment to offices. This violates the principles of the separation of powers. Wilson ended with a populist tone, saying, the President will not be the man of the people as he ought to be, but the minion of the Senate. Alexander Hamilton of New York understood the difficulties for the electors to coalesce around a single candidate. Quote, considering the different views of different states and the different districts, northern, middle, and southern, the votes would not be concentered. Never using the term nomination, Hamilton, for all intents and purposes, described a system in which the electors would nominate candidates, and ultimately, the appointment would consequently, in the present mode, devolve on the Senate. The aversion to the Senate culminated with its successful removal from the process, and in its place, the House of Representatives would vote by state delegation. Taking away appointment powers from the Senate and giving them to the state delegations in the House of Representatives was shown to be very appealing, as every state approved with the exception of Delaware. The electors nominate and the House selects concept was not absolute. The framers added the double ballot into the process of choosing the president. Double balloting gave each elector 2 votes, but requires one of their votes to be for someone not of their home state. The framers believed electors would vote with bias and default to local candidates in their home states. Without double balloting, electors could produce as many candidates as there are states. By installing the double balloting feature, the potential for continental figures to emerge and achieve a majority was possible. Governor Morris of Pennsylvania claimed electors would coalesce around a single candidate, saying, "It is probable that a majority of the votes will fall on the same man. As each elector is to give 2 votes, more than 1/4 will give a majority." The Framers' Electoral College, with electors nominating and the House of Representatives selecting the president, uses both concepts of decentralization and deliberation to determine the next president. Decentralization is defined as the transfer of control of an activity or organization to several local offices or authorities, rather than one single one. Deliberation is defined as a long and careful consideration or discussion. With the Framers' Electoral College, decentralization was achieved by separating the electors into their home states. Unable to meet and/or coordinate in any plausible fashion, their role was fragmented. The electors could deliberate with other electors within their state capitals, but coordination with electors in other states would be limited. This is especially true in the post-revolutionary period where communication was difficult. After casting their 2 votes, assuming no majority, the House of Representatives took over. Although less decentralized than the electors, the House of Representatives has a variety of different elected leaders from across the several states. Voting as state delegations, representatives could deliberate within their delegation and also deliberate with other states. Within this entire process, a centralized national election for president between 2 candidates does not exist. The framers' method is the idea of creating electoral institutions that are based in both decentralization and deliberation. With a reasonable amount of clarity, we can surmise that the framers of the Constitution were mostly interested in presidential systems that embodied decentralization and deliberation. The framers debated 4 methods that use decentralization and deliberation to varying degrees: the legislature method, the electors method, the governor's method, and the state legislature's method. The popular vote discussed by the framers does not embody decentralization or deliberation. It uses a national vote that centralizes the election into 2 or a few candidates. When campaigning, these candidates do not deliberate but instead use populist rhetoric to win as many votes as possible. The popular vote does not embody the concepts of the framers' method. It should also be noted that the modern electoral college does not embody the concepts of the framers' method either. Further discussions on these comparisons will be made in future videos. The effort to decentralize the appointment of the president, with electors voting throughout the several states, and then deliberate in the House of Representatives, ultimately proved futile. Once the system was put into practice, the framers became politicians, organized into parties, and set about to control the presidential process to suit their factional and ideological desires. By the time George Washington completed his 2nd term, the framers' method was no more. Thanks again for watching the framers' method. If you want to support this channel, please like and subscribe on our social media platforms, and consider supporting this channel on your preferred membership platform, all of which can be found on the website at framersmethod.com.